Chapter 1241, Everyone's powers have increased. Under Zhang Yi's supervision, everyone in the family is also working hard to improve. However, now that everyone's ability index has reached the elite player and captain level, the gap in talent has become apparent. Although Zhang Yi has a large amount of mutant beast origin in his hands. However, the efficiency of absorption by different people shows a huge gap. Among everyone, Liang Yu's talent is unexpectedly high. Her basic panel value is too high, and the conversion rate of absorbing the origin of mutant beasts is also very high. In fact, after returning from the Qinling Mountains, her supernatural ability index reached 9,700 points. This was the result of absorbing the origins of 2 captain-level mutant beasts and Qinglan. Considering her enhanced attributes in close combat, if she is allowed to get close, she may be able to unexpectedly kill an epsilon-level mutant in seconds. Even Zhang Yi, when facing Liang Yu, dared not completely let down his guard, because every day the two of them sparred at the stadium, and Zhang Yi would be picked on a bit. Later, after Zhang Yi carefully cultivated her, her strength slowly reached the threshold of 9,800 points, and as a result, the speed at which she absorbed the origin of mutant beasts gradually slowed down. Although Zhang Yi could have used the origin of mutant beasts in his hands to forcibly push her combat power up in a short period of time. However, this method is too low in cost and effectiveness. Zhang Yi is a thrifty person, so he did not plan to do this. In addition, Flower's supernatural ability index has also reached 9,999 points, and he is only one step away from a complete breakthrough. After taking the Source of God, his genetic limits have been unlocked, and in theory, he has the highest natural talent in the sanctuary, apart from Zhang Yi. He just needs to keep fighting to stimulate his potential, and sooner or later he will reach the threshold of Epsilon. Apart from the two of them, the other partners in the sanctuary have also received huge boosts. Uncle Yu's ability index has surpassed the threshold of the deputy captain level and reached a height of 8,100 points. He is not satisfied with this figure because Zhang Yi has spent more materials on him. It took the mutant beast's origins of 3 captains to just barely bring him up to this level. It will be extremely difficult to make further progress. Uncle Yu sighed and said to Zhang Yi, "My limit may be here. It is true that hard work can make a person stronger. But in order to reach the top in a certain field, talent is still the key." Zhang Yi smiled and comforted him, "There's no need to rush. Fatty didn't become fat overnight. Perhaps you need to slowly digest all this power. It's also because I was in a hurry that I wanted to make you guys stronger." Hearing this, Fatty Sue, who was not far away, was not happy. "Boss, you guys can say what you like, but don't keep on snubbing me." He said this while occasionally looking down to play games. Zhang Yi and Uncle Yu leaned over to have a look. "Wow, he's still connected to someone else." Uncle Yu laughed, and Zhang Yi and Uncle Yu exchanged glances, their eyes full of amusement. "Who are you connected to?" they asked knowingly. Fatty Sue blushed, "Well, I have a friend." "A friend my ass." At a time like this, he's still hiding it. Who else but Liang could play games with him? Zhang Yi asked curiously, "How are things between you two now? You've already broken up, so why are you still attached?" Fatty Sue jumped up and said, "What do you mean by split up? I told you, I'm not seeing her. It's just that I think she's a really nice person. It's nice to get along with her as a friend." Zhang Yi snorted, "That's right, as long as you don't go all the way, you can hypnotize yourself in your head and imagine that she's just a pretty girl." "Ow!" Before Zhang Yi could finish, Fatty Sue immediately covered his ears with both hands and ran away. Indeed, he had taken the maxim "it's shameful but useful to escape to the extreme," just self-numbing and avoiding reality. Zhang Yi didn't bother with him, and he took care of his own relationship matters. However, due to being stimulated by Liang, Fatty Sue had indeed undergone some changes. On the surface, he said he didn't like crossdressers, but he had much more energy when training. Now, with Zhang Yi's help, his supernatural ability index had reached 8,000 points. For whose benefit, Zhang Yi won't say, but everyone knows. Fat nerds are such a complicated species. Apart from them, Yang Xinxin's ability index has also reached 9,000 points. She doesn't seem to be keen on becoming stronger. The owner of a rule-based ability relies on her mind, not just her ability. She prefers to be the woman behind Zhang Yi, taking charge of everything and giving advice for him. In contrast, Liu Karen is more concerned about improving her strength. She is a doctor and the body steward of Zhang Yi. The stronger she becomes, the more secure Zhang Yi's physical health and safety will be. As an auxiliary ability user, she does not need to fight to gain experience. She can simply improve the accuracy of her abilities through repeated practice, treatment, or experiments with microscopic organisms. So she didn't hold anyone back, and she also reached the 9,000 point threshold for captain level. It was during this practice that her abilities finally exploded. A new ability, body modification. Put simply, it means that she can change the physical quality of living things by touching them. This gives her a certain degree of lethality. In theory, anyone whose body she touches can be manipulated as she wishes. Distort the flesh, destroy the internal organs. However, as a non-combatant, this kind of attack method is difficult to use, and can only be used in special moments. But the ability of body modification has demonstrated its powerful effect when helping teammates. She can help Zhang Yi have the most perfect physique. Nowadays, Zhang Yi's physical fitness is comparable to a beta-class enhanced mutant. This is a huge improvement for Zhang Yi. Although it does not allow him to fight close-quarters combat with a mutant of epsilon level. But the improvement in basic physical fitness will enhance his endurance and allow him to deal with many complex environments. To give an example, if Zhang Yi fights a mutant of the same level, he will run out of strength. At such times, the superiority of physical fitness will be demonstrated. Whoever can hold on longer will be the one to smile at the end. Relatively speaking, Yang Xia's supernatural powers have not improved quickly or slowly. Her talent ceiling is not high, and she enjoys the same treatment as Liu Karen, having just barely reached the 8,000 point level. But this little woman is very content with the status quo. To her, the ability index and other things are just ingredients that make the food she makes more delicious and more able to fill Zhang Yi's stomach. What really surprised Zhang Yi was Liu Karen. Because of her ability index, it soared to 9,500 points in one go. Chapter 1242, The Supervisor Sent to the Qinling Mountains. In order to help Zhang Yi study the spirit of sacrifice, Liu Karen inevitably absorbed a portion of it herself. She didn't know it herself, but this had a subtle effect on her. Plus, Zhang Yi never hid anything from Liu Karen and had always cultivated her as a valuable technology tree. As a result, Liu Karen's ability index also soared all the way until it stopped at 9,500 points. This rate of improvement surprised even Zhang Yi. It meant that Liu Karen's own capacity had changed again, and perhaps it could be said that her potential had increased. After a mutant reaches their limit, it is like a kettle that has been filled to the brim with water. No matter how much origin they absorb, they will not make any further progress, or the progress will be extremely slow. If Zhang Yi had not previously shared some of the source of God with everyone, they might not have been able to reach the 9,000 point threshold so easily. Liu Karen, on the other hand, had accidentally come into contact with the even more mysterious spirit of sacrifice. Zhang Yi had considered this possibility, but if Liu Karen, who had absorbed a trace amount of the spirit of sacrifice, had undergone such a marked change, what about him? Zhang Yi recalled the strange changes in his own body recently and could not help but fall into thought. Putting those aside, Liu Karen's improvement in strength was great news for Zhang Yi. With the help of the two laborers, Uncle Yu and Fatty Su, she had built a huge furnace in the basement. It could quickly smelt yuan ore and refine the purest yuan material. This stuff was similar to coal and somewhat close to metal, but it didn't release energy by burning. Fortunately, Xinjing district had done advanced research and provided Zhang Yi with the methods for using it. As a result, soon Liu Karen will be able to extract the energy of the yuan stone and apply it in the industrial sector. She said confidently to Zhang Yi, "Brother, give me a maximum of 2 months, and I can build the upgraded second-generation exoskeleton armor. By then, I will definitely give you even more powerful combat capabilities." The little girl's face was flushed with excitement, and she looked at Zhang Yi as if she could already see him wearing the battle armor, going up to the sky and down to the ground. Liu Karen had built the first generation of battle armor, which Zhang Yi had seen before, and only Uncle Yu had worn it. Overall, the appearance was already very good. It was made of titanium alloy and weighed only about 20 kilograms. However, because compressed fuel and weapons needed to be carried, the whole set weighed more than 60 kilograms. This obviously did not suit Zhang Yi at first. Now, after Zhou Keir's body modification, the 60-plus kilogram battle armor would not put too much pressure on Zhang Yi's body. But obviously, the lighter and tougher it is, and the more flexible the joints are, the better it is. With Liu Karen's improved strength and the new energy substance, he was able to quickly create the second-generation armor. "Brother, I will carefully create the best battle armor for you. If it can be made entirely from the best E-metal, and paired with new weapons and equipment, then wearing this battle armor will allow an ordinary person to have the strength of a high-level Delta mutant. Worn by you, it will make you even more powerful." Zhang Yi's eyes shone with excitement. That would be excellent. Men have an obsession with armor. Zhang Yi in particular, although he was keen on weapons, liked body armor even more. In this way, his biggest concern about close combat defense was also well addressed. Unless he encounters a top-notch expert at close combat, such as a mutant like Liang Yu, it would be difficult for an average mutant to break through his defenses. You have to understand that even the best combat suits in the region would have difficulty blocking an Epsilon-class mutant's attack. Liu Karen's current capabilities are already moving in this direction with the exoskeleton armor she has created. Who knows, maybe one day she will be able to create armor comparable to Epsilon-class mutants. Zhang Yi looked at Liu Karen and saw a huge treasure with unlimited potential. He secretly thought that he must find a way to get the source of God for Liu Karen in the future. As for the spirit of sacrifice, it also seemed to have the effect of enhancing potential. He just didn't know how effective it was compared to the source of God and what the connection between them was. Less than a month later, Zhang Yi received news from Xinjing. The excavation of Yuan ore had resumed. There was no sign of movement from the mysterious existence in the underground world, so Xinjing sent many worthless miners to begin trying to clear the abyss area and conduct exploratory excavations. After confirming that there were no accidents, they planned to conduct large-scale mining. And now, with the annihilation of the Earth centipede colony, the pace of mining can be accelerated. The Jiangnan region, which controls 30% of the resources, must send personnel to supervise the distribution of yuan ore while also sending people down to work. Zhang Yi thought about it and called Gao Tianwu, who had been tempered at Chaoyu base, over. Gao Tianwu's ability index was currently less than 5,000 points, which was considered strong among ordinary people. But if you really want to talk about it, he would have difficulty even reaching the threshold for entering the investigation team. However, there was one thing that made Zhang Yi very optimistic about him. That was that he was young, ambitious, and responsible. Zhang Yi considered himself just an ordinary person, neither good nor bad. But Gao Tianwu was willing to give up some personal interests for the sake of the people in the village, so he can be considered a good person. Yes, people always like to use good people and are willing to believe in some good people. However, it seems that no one wants to be a good person, which is a bit ironic. Gao Tianwu went to Chaoyu base and has been doing a good job. Although he is actively becoming stronger, he has also developed some of his own subordinates. However, he did a good job with Zhang Yi's arrangements and cooperated well with the work of Liu Dehai and Qin Jingguan. Zhang Yi decided to give him a chance to take charge of a project alone. So he decided to let him take a few brothers and go to the Qinling Mountains to supervise the collection of yuan ore. And Zhang Yi asked Gao Tianwu, going to Xinjing is not considered a difficult task, and there is even some profit. However, once you go, you will be far away from the emperor, and you need to establish good relationships with the local organizations. In addition, Blizzard City will also send someone there. You are my man, and they won't make things difficult for you there under my name. But after all, you are an outsider, and you may suffer minor setbacks or be excluded. Zhang Yi said with a smile, if you encounter minor troubles, you have to deal with them yourself. Don't report trivial matters to me. I let you go there just to let you do a good job yourself, and the best thing is not to cause me trouble. Of course, we don't cause trouble, and we're not afraid of it either. If anyone dares to touch my interests, just let me know. No matter who it is, I'll make them eat their words. Chapter 1243, Space Ability Upgrade. After listening to Zhang Yi's words, Gao Tianwu immediately said, I understand all of this. Thank you, Boss Zhang, for giving me this opportunity. I will do a good job and I won't let you down. Zhang Yi said indifferently, you're good at everything, except your strength is a bit lacking. Have you been practicing with a gun properly lately? Gao Tianwu hurriedly said, I dare not slack off in any way. I'm in charge of a team now, and I practice seriously every day. For ordinary people and low-level mutants, thermal weapons still pose a great threat. Zhang Yi took out an origin of an Earth centipede from dimensional space. Although it was not of captain level, it was still of 7,000, 8,000 level. Here is an origin of a mutant beast. Absorb it and improve your strength as soon as possible. After this time, bring 10 mutants from Chaoyu base. In addition, every month, you can take as much Yuan stone as you need. This is for your living and trading for supplies. I will have the Deng family provide you with medicine so that you can improve your strength as soon as possible. Zhang Yi had made relatively adequate arrangements for Gao Tianwu and the others. It wasn't that he wanted to meddle, it was just that the current level of combat power in Tianhai City was too low. In the 3 major bases, not even the most powerful leader had reached the level of captain. With the strength of Gao Tianwu and his brothers, if they went to the Ghost Valley, they would be a laughingstock. At least they need to get stronger, to support Zhang Yi's doors. They don't need to be too strong, but at least they need to be good enough. Time froze for Gao Tianwu for a moment. It was as if a huge pie had suddenly fallen from the sky and landed on his head. Zhang Yi has always been very generous with the people around him, and he will not mistreat anyone. But this little bit of favor that has slipped through his fingers is really too much for Gao Tianwu nowadays. He pounded his chest excitedly and said loudly, Boss Zhang, you value me, and I will never forget this kindness. I will go to Xingjing and definitely not bring you any shame. Zhang Yi smiled faintly, I don't care what you say, I want to see what you do. The journey is long, and you will have to consider everything on your own. I only care about the results. If you don't do a good job, I will find someone to replace you. Gao Tianwu nodded, I understand. He clenched his fists tightly, feeling that boundless wealth right in front of his eyes. He also knew that leaving his comfort zone would cause a lot of trouble. He and his subordinates were not strong enough, and they were going to work in the most powerful district, so they would definitely be looked down upon and even made difficult. But he had to grit his teeth and endure. As long as he could get through it, he would have made it. By then, he would have a better future than the leaders of the 3 major bases in Tianhai City, who were just waiting to die. After all, Zhang Yi's attitude towards the 3 bases was very average, just letting them fend for themselves and not interfering too much. But Yuan ore was a property that Zhang Yi valued very highly. If he did well, he would be a regional governor, and Zhang Yi would be able to support him less in the future. Gao Tianwu was full of joy and excitement, and left with the things Zhang Yi gave him. He only had 1 day to organize his troops. The next day, he would set off for Blizzard City, and then follow the people there to Ghost Valley. Gao Tianwu left, and he was going to the Northlands, where it was even colder, to stay for a very long time. Zhang Yi watched him leave the shelter. He walked a long way in the snow, leaving a long trail of footprints on the ground. But then he stopped at a certain distance, turned around, and bowed deeply to Zhang Yi, who was watching him from the window. Zhang Yi gave a faint smile. Leaning against the window, he reached out and waved his hand towards the coffee table a dozen meters away. A cup of coffee on the table immediately flew towards him, swaying unsteadily before falling into Zhang Yi's hands in a stylish but unsteady manner, spilling coffee all over the place. Zhang Yi took a sip of coffee and said lightly, "Although I can actively collect objects, my control seems to be a bit off. Also, I can't actively absorb humans, which is very strange." An increase in the ability index means that the ability has been unlocked to a greater extent. His dimensional space collection ability has become stronger, with a wider range, and the ability to actively plunder and absorb. After some experimentation, he can now even uproot an entire shelter from the ground and absorb it into his own dimensional space. However, there is still a limitation: it is not effective on humans. Zhang Yi has experimented with many types of objects, and can actively collect both living and dead things, as well as microorganisms. However, there are two exceptions. One is living organisms with supernatural powers. The other is humans. It seems that there is some kind of special power in their bodies that opposes Zhang Yi's space, preventing him from absorbing them as he pleases. Zhang Yi sips his coffee as he pulls a book out of dimensional space with his other hand. It is a reference book on the Snowy Plateau. In the recent past, Pa Jigsan contacted Zhang Yi twice. Both times, he invited Zhang Yi to the snowy region to attend the Chuanzhou Dharma Assembly the following year. In order to impress Zhang Yi, he also sent him some photos and videos. Zhang Yi saw the majestic Great Snow Mountain, which suddenly burst into a brilliant green-gold Buddha light one dim afternoon, like a golden wheel shrouding the top of the mountain. Zhang Yi didn't tell Pa Jigsan whether he was going or not, just to keep Pa Jigsan waiting. He was thinking about how much he could gain from this trip. But obviously, the changes on Star Island reminded him that it was no longer safe to stay in Tianhai City. He must work hard to become stronger and figure out the origin of those powerful and mysterious creatures in the underground. From the East Sea, there were some movements coming one after the other. Even though they were far away, Zhang Yi was able to detect them. Zhang Yi knew very well that it was the people from the East Sea region or other large forces who had taken action. They must have ventured deep into the fog and clashed with the unknowable creatures. But none of this concerns Zhang Yi, and he will not risk his life. Right now, he has more important things to do. In the blink of an eye, 2 months have passed. February 2053 on the planet calendar. More than 2 years have passed since the beginning of the end of the world. On the side of the shelter, Liu Karen has been busy with two things: perfecting her exoskeleton armor and building the Earth Centipede farm. The Earth Centipede breeding farm is built next to the shelter. It is a huge cave dug 200 meters underground with the help of Uncle Yu and Fatty Sue. After all, these creatures live underground and have certain temperature requirements for their living environment. Although they are not that fragile, in order to ensure the smooth construction of the breeding farm, these hard-won and possibly even the only remaining Earth Centipede eggs must be bred with high quality. In addition, cages made of reinforced concrete and a portion of E-metal are needed to prevent these things from escaping after they grow up. Today, Liu Karen's supernatural ability index is as high as 9,500 points, and her ability to refine materials has improved by leaps and bounds. So she can mass-produce E-metal, and this material problem is completely out of the question. Chapter 1244 Exoskeleton Mecha. Regarding the construction of the breeding farm, Zhou Qi naturally helped guide the biological aspects. Earth centipedes are subterranean mutant creatures that can survive the difficult environment after the end of the world. They are extremely tenacious, so there is no need to worry about them not being able to hatch. After hatching, however, consideration needs to be given to how to tame their wild nature and make them domesticated animals that simply provide origin for the mutants. Zhou Qi gave constructive guidance. Start screening after hatching. Kill the most aggressive ones as soon as they hatch, and only keep the gentle ones. The food supply needs to be sufficient, the living environment needs to be comfortable, and fighting among them needs to be strictly punished. If this continues over time, they will lose their fighting nature. Even if their origin continues to grow stronger, they will lose their ability to fight. Liu Karen rested his chin in his hands and said uncertainly, After all, they are mutant beasts, and it is difficult to tame their animal nature. If they suddenly erupt one day, it will be hard to control them. I will continue to reinforce the breeding facility to prevent accidents, Liu Karen said with a smile. Don't worry, I still have ways to deal with this kind of problem. We just need to inject them with drugs to weaken their limbs from the time they hatch. We can also add a lot of hormones to their daily food. That should be safe. Anyway, all we need is their origin. It doesn't matter what happens to the rest of them. Liu Karen glanced at Liu Karen, who was wearing a smiling face and a white lab coat, and suddenly shivered. Liu Karen, I suddenly feel that you are very scary. Liu Karen looked up at her words, and shifted her gaze from the notebook she was using to record the experiment to the ceiling. Really? But there is a similarity between a doctor and a butcher. Anyone who has seen a surgical operation knows this. Liu Karen smiled. Anyway, I'm only responsible for building the farm, and the later breeding will be handled by you and Uncle Yu and Brother Su. At this time, Uncle Yu and Fatty Su were wearing full protective suits and checking the status of the earth centipede eggs inside the farm. Liu Karen and Liu Karen were in charge of the technical work, and of course they had to do the manual labor. The breeding plan for the earth centipede went ahead like this. For Zhang Yi, the thing he was most looking forward to was also the mecha project that Liu Karen had been thinking about for nearly 2 years, and finally a major breakthrough had been made. On this day, Liu Karen mysteriously called Zhang Yi to her laboratory. Today, there are more than 10 underground laboratories in the underground laboratory, all of which are reserved for Liu Karen. After all, there is no need for a warehouse here, so the space is very large. Liu Karen took Zhang Yi and opened a tightly closed alloy door. Brother, I have been researching mecha for such a long time, and I have finally created the perfect set. I'm sure you'll like it, Liu Karen said confidently, looking at Zhang Yi with pride before opening the doors. Mecha, this kind of thing originally only existed in science fiction movies. But for nearly a century, militaries around the world have been conducting research and secretly applying it to militarization. However, due to various issues such as cost, technology, and functionality, mecha has never officially appeared in front of the world. To date, most of the technical problems have actually been solved by Liu Karen. The only problem is solving the energy issue. The cost-effectiveness of large mechas is extremely low, and it is not even as good as using the same materials to build an armored vehicle. However, exoskeletons have a different meaning in the age of mutants. It can be attached to the outside of the human body and become part of human combat power. Whether it is defense, attack, or even carrying its own combat assistance system, it is of great benefit to the mutants. Zhang Yi looked towards the slowly opening laboratory. In the center of the laboratory, he saw a pair of pitch-black full-body armor standing quietly on the workbench, as if a dormant beast was waiting for its master to awaken it. The jet-black exterior and streamlined shape were filled with extreme beauty. The matte exterior had no reflection and was somewhat simple, but it happened to be an extremely advantageous attribute for combat. Even the tactical eyepiece of the helmet did not reflect a single glint. Zhang Yi thought to himself when he saw it for the first time, black? Will that be too obvious? Liu Karen hurriedly said, it comes with a chameleon system that can make it optically invisible depending on its surroundings. And you can also control its color yourself. Zhang Yi nodded with satisfaction. He went over to the armor and looked at it carefully. As it turned out, you couldn't tell what its capabilities were just by looking at it. It looks pretty good, and the exterior gives the impression of being quite thin, not as cumbersome as one might imagine a mech to be. Liu Karen was standing nearby, carefully explaining its performance to Zhang Yi. I named this mech suit Submerging Dragon, and it is the second-generation mech suit I have developed. Uncle Yu tested the first-generation mech suit, and its overall performance was already quite good. I have significantly enhanced its performance based on that. First, in terms of weight, thanks to the Yuan substance, the weight of carrying compressed fuel has been reduced. And with my enhanced capabilities, the performance of E-metal has also been improved. So the weight of this exoskeleton suit is only 15 kilograms. 15 kilograms might have been a bit much for Zhang Yi in the past. But nowadays, first, he exercises regularly, and second, his body has been enhanced by Liu Karen's body modification, so the weight is completely bearable for him and doesn't cause any stress at all. Zhang Yi stared carefully at the suit of armor. Under the control of Liu Karen, it was changing colors, demonstrating its optical stealth capabilities. I can now carry up to 50 kilograms on my body during normal combat without affecting my movements. So you can add another 15 kilograms of weapons and other tools on top. Don't go over 30 kilograms. Liu Karen nodded. Weapons are not a big problem for you, brother. You can store them in dimensional space. But just in case, I've added a high-energy compressed cannon to my wrist. It's the only weapon I have to reduce weight, but its attack power is absolutely trustworthy. It's not weaker than your Thunderstrike. So next, I'll add other tools to the armor, such as medicine and spare food. Zhang Yi nodded. Very good. He reached out. So, what about defense capabilities? Zhang Yi didn't particularly care about attack capabilities or anything. You can't expect a suit of armor to give him the power to fight Epsilon-level enhanced mutants. So it's best to focus on enhancing defense. Chapter 1245, Testing the Armor. Liu Karen of course understood what Zhang Yi cared about. She gave a smile and said, "Don't you worry about that." She winked at Zhang Yi and said, "I have been polishing this mecha for half a year. It is made of E-metal and a material similar to E-metal. In terms of defense, it can withstand the first shot of a Tomahawk missile without being destroyed. And the interior has been redesigned based on the performance of the military's black battle suit. Even if it withstands an explosive impact, it can also dissipate most of the impact. According to my estimate, its overall defense power is roughly equivalent to a reinforced mutant with an ability index of around 9,500 points." Zhang Yi's eyes suddenly lit up. "That's great! This greatly enhances his survivability." Liu Karen continued, "And I've also considered its flexibility. Brother, take a look at this." She picked up the computer in her hands and entered a series of commands. The next moment, Zhang Yi saw that the Submerging Dragon armor in front of him actually looked like a carp, with countless scales rising all over its body. It opened and closed very smoothly, as if ripples were spreading out. Upon closer inspection, he realized that the armor was actually not made in one piece. Instead, it was a set of armor made up of many scales. "Is this chain mail?" Zhang Yi immediately recognized the inspiration behind the design. Liu Karen shook his head. "Not exactly. Some areas are connected in one piece, but most areas, especially the joints, are made of fish scale armor. In that case, it can be guaranteed that when you wear the armor, it will be like wearing a suit, and you won't feel uncomfortable moving around. In addition, since the energy problem has been solved, there is a hidden jet tail at the back, which can achieve super high-speed flight for a short period of time." Liu Karen scratched his head and said awkwardly, "I have greatly reduced the weight of the mecha, considering your abilities. A lot of the weapons and equipment have been cut, and even the flight mode can only last up to half an hour. Brother, I think you can accept this, right?" Zhang Yi nodded continuously in satisfaction at this time. This was exactly the kind of armor he wanted. It can even be said that this suit of armor is most valuable to him alone, and is completely custom-made. Even if it fell into the hands of someone else, I'm afraid it would just be a set of tortoise shells with a single combat attribute, focusing on defense. However, Zhang Yi's main focus is long-range attacks. The mecha he needs has high defense, high mobility, and a high degree of flexibility, and that is enough. Zhang Yi took a deep breath, his eyes gleaming with joy. He said to Liu Karen, "Where can I still have any opinions? I'm simply satisfied beyond satisfaction. Karen, I really like this exoskeleton armor of yours. The weapon is lightweight because Zhang Yi's dimensional space is not lacking in weapons, and there is no need to pile them on, which would only add weight. Time for high-speed flight is short, because Zhang Yi is capable of flying on his own, and this function is only for emergencies. And if a long flight is really necessary, Zhang Yi can just refuel, which is not a problem at all. At this point, Zhang Yi was already a little impatient. Has this suit been tested by humans? Liu Karen nodded. I've tested it thousands of times, and there are no safety risks. Liu Karen understands Zhang Yi, and he doesn't like being a guinea pig. Zhang Yi nodded, not that he didn't trust Liu Karen's technology, but he was just used to it. Liu Karen handed over control of the mech to Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi removed his outer clothing and was dressed only in a black battle suit liner before walking up to the mech. The fish scale armor immediately opened a gap, allowing Zhang Yi to put it on like a onesie. After putting on the armor, Zhang Yi felt amazing, as if he was wearing a slightly heavy tracksuit, without feeling oppressed or heavy. The human exoskeleton armor itself was built according to Zhang Yi's body structure, and as long as it didn't lose energy, it would save Zhang Yi a lot of physical strength. Wearing it, one only needed to use a very small amount of strength to allow one to carry very heavy things. Zhang Yi glanced around through the tactical eyepiece, and soon he adapted to it all. I'm going out to try the power of this armor. Zhang Yi rubbed his hands together, excitedly taking a few steps. He moved as if riding the wind, his footsteps quick. He and Liu Karen left the underground laboratory and went outside. His family was not surprised to see this, as they had long known about the development of this armor. It was just the first time they had seen Zhang Yi wear it. Yang Xia put down the dinner sword in her hand and smiled in surprise. It seems that Zhang Yi's armor has been completed. This must be a very powerful thing. Zhou Haimei laughed next to her. Yes, who doesn't know that in Karen's heart, her brother Zhang Yi is the most important. The two of them smiled at each other, but still quickly took off their aprons and put on their thick clothes before following him out. Zhang Yi left the shelter and immediately began to try out the basic functions of the armor. The capabilities of the potential armor are very numerous and complex, requiring days and nights of memorizing the instructions. However, most of the functions are only auxiliary, and normal use is not affected with or without them. Therefore, Zhang Yi only tested a few of its most important abilities. One of them is flying. Zhang Yi made full safety preparations, and everything follows the trail, allows him to escape the moment he senses the armor getting out of control. Therefore, there is nothing to worry about. Pulling the speed to the full in one go, he soared into the sky. 2 blue flashes of light followed behind him, and his flight speed surpassed that of the latest fighter jets. Flying at high speed was really exhilarating. Strictly speaking, Zhang Yi had never experienced the feeling of high-speed flight before. He had always been the first to take the space shuttle. So this time, he was able to truly feel the thrill of the wind creating a terrifying sonic boom behind him. The people in the shelter watched him from afar, and all they could see was Zhang Yi charging up and down in the air, performing multiple tests in an irregular manner. The ability to fly, the Submerging Dragon, did not disappoint Zhang Yi, indeed it was perfect. And the energy supply problem can be solved simply by replacing the Yuan energy block. As for the intelligent combat system, it is not much different from the intelligent system of the combat suit. Liu Karen is good at mechanics, and the military is still a bit more advanced in terms of intelligent systems. What Zhang Yi is using, however, was personally designed by Yang Xinxin, and after being revised by the military combat system, it is another independent version. So there is basically no need to worry about someone hacking into the armor's intelligent system. The weapon system, like the Thunderstrike and White Eagle used by Zhang Yi, is a top-level energy storage weapon that needs no further introduction. In terms of defense, it is made of the latest E-metal and is also trustworthy. What surprised Zhang Yi the most was its flexibility. There was no feeling of heaviness at all when controlling the mech, no wonder it is called an exoskeleton mech. Zhang Yi took out the Holy Judgment horizontal sword and performed a sword technique, the horizontal sword breaking the air with a loud noise. Elbows, shoulders, knees, ankles, and crotch all stretch freely, ensuring that melee combat is not affected. This suit of armor can only be described in 2 words, perfect. Chapter 1246 The Power of Technology. After the Submerging Dragon armor was tested by Zhang Yi, the results were extremely satisfactory. With the help of the exoskeleton, his strength and speed were further enhanced during close combat. According to Zhang Yi's own estimation, the assistance of this armor can at least increase his ability index by 500 points. This may not seem like a lot, but it is extremely important, as it greatly enhances Zhang Yi's survivability and becomes Zhang Yi's trump card. For example, if he is fighting with someone else and they have both hit rock bottom and are on the verge of running out of energy, this armor will allow him to have the combat power of a captain for a short period of time. It is extremely useful in critical moments, and it is simply perfect for everyday use as a super-enhanced combat suit. Zhang Yi swept across the Lujiang River with the Holy Judgment in his hands. He swung his right hand forward, not using any supernatural powers, but relying purely on the power of the mecha and the sharpness of the Holy Judgment. The first blow cut a half-meter deep, several hundred meters long furrow in the ice. Not bad. Zhang Yi landed on the edge of the Lujiang River, looked very satisfied at his new equipment, and nodded with a smile. Quack! The frog poked a big hole from under the ice, climbed out and blinked its big, round eyes at Zhang Yi. It was very confused. It had been sleeping soundly when it was suddenly woken up. Zhang Yi heard the cry and looked back at it, then opened his mask. Sorry, did I wake you up? The frog was excited to see that the person was actually Zhang Yi, and jumped over excitedly. Looking at the mecha on Zhang Yi's body, the frog's eyes filled with stars, and it excitedly rubbed its hands together. Wow! It's a mecha, it's really cool. After all, frogs were also once humans, and there was hardly a man in the world who could resist the charm of mechas and excavators. Seeing the frog, Zhang Yi laughed. You really slept for a long time this time. The frog patted its snow-white belly and said, sleeping is such a beautiful thing. There are 3 things I like best in my life: catching insects, sleeping, and sharing wonderful music with friends. Hearing this, Zhang Yi suddenly had an idea. Frog, you like to eat insects so much. What do you think about letting you raise insects? It seemed that the frog had a special ability to control insects. Although this ability seems weak against high-level insects, it should be twice as effective if cultivated, becoming the manager of an earth centipede breeding farm. The frog's eyes lit up. Are there enough insects? Zhang Yi's eye corner twitched. Enough? Those earth centipede eggs were all born after the centipede queen had devoured a large amount of Yuan stone Oregon. Their shells are all colorful, and the earth centipedes born are also among the strongest. If you let the frog eat them, it seems like it won't be enough. When those things grow up, they weigh at least a few thousand catties at the head, and the protein content is many times that of beef. That's fine, Zhang Yi said. The frog hopped excitedly a few times in place. Croak. That would be fantastic. Zhang Yi took the frog back with him, and his family hurried over to ask Zhang Yi if his new armor was working well. Zhang Yi gave a thumbs up. It couldn't be any better. I'm very satisfied with this suit of armor. He brought the frog over and said to Zhou Kare, in the future, the frog will help you manage the farm. He whispered to Zhou Kare, if we ever leave, someone has to look after the worms for us. Just in case something happens. If they're not there, these terrifying earth centipedes could cause a terrible disaster in the Jiangnan region. Zhang Yi certainly wants to be very careful. Zhou Kare nodded knowingly and smiled. With the help of the frog, managing the farm in the future will be much easier. She waved at the frog, took it to the farm, and explained to it the knowledge of raising earth centipedes. Zhang Yi came to Liu Karen, who was full of enthusiasm. Liu Karen's eyes were shining. She was extremely excited that her hard work had been recognized by Zhang Yi. That was the greatest pride of a technician. Karen, thank you very much for your help to me all along, Zhang Yi said sincerely. Liu Karen's face flushed, her fists clenched, and a bead of sweat formed on the palm of her hand from the excitement. This suit of armor can only achieve maximum effect when worn by you, my brother. From now on, when you are roaming anywhere in the world, people will see my masterpiece. This is my greatest gain. So, brother, I should be the one thanking you for giving me this opportunity. Zhang Yi smiled slightly. We have also achieved something together, haven't we? Liu Karen nodded. Zhang Yi glanced over to the side, where Uncle Yu and Fatty Sue were not far away, staring at the perfect exoskeleton mech on his body. The light in their eyes was more excited than if they had seen a top-level beauty. What Uncle Yu saw was a powerful weapon that enhanced combat effectiveness. Fatty Sue saw a giant Gundam action figure. Zhang Yi then asked Liu Karen, "Can this armor be mass-produced?" Liu Karen had long known that Zhang Yi would ask this question. She replied, "Give me enough materials and time, and I can replicate another suit in a month. However, this armor is tailored for you, brother, and it won't fit anyone else. For example, the armor created for Uncle Yu. Weapons are definitely the most important, because Uncle Yu's attack method is single and lacks long-range output ability. And for Fatty Sue, forget it, just match some weapons at random, and just enhance the weight-bearing ability and escape ability. After all, when Fatty Sue fights, he can run far away and release skills to control the field, which is not bad." Zhang Yi touched his nose and said, "That's true. Mass production doesn't make sense, after all, the abilities of each mutant are different. Moreover, Liu Karen also needs to expend a lot of energy and use his supernatural powers to build the armor. If there's a way, I'd still like to build everyone a set. It doesn't need to be too powerful, and as I said, the main focus should be on the ability to protect and escape." Liu Karen nodded and smiled. "I've already considered this. When I was building the Submerging Dragon, I had more than 10 experimental mechas. Although their performance wasn't as good as the Submerging Dragon, they're still good for self-defense. I'll modify them and let everyone use them." Zhang Yi looked at Liu Karen curiously. "What about you?" Liu Karen crossed his arms, smiled mysteriously, and shook his head. "I'll be fine." Zhang Yi's gaze suddenly became suspicious. "Is it some kind of super-secret weapon?" Liu Karen nudged him. "You'll find out later. But I can't show you mine yet because it's not finished. And mine is the only one I can control."